Welcome in. We are at episode number 27, and today we are bringing on somebody from across the planet to bring a better perspective on a different but very similar economy, as well as set up the next generation financially. It's one thing to talk about the problems. We want to dissect those. Obviously, we know a lot of them that are going on. If you're listening to the show, pretty much each show's about another one. But we want to bring solutions and position you best that as the economy unfolds, you're ahead of it. So I thought no better than Mr. Thomas Kriaris, and I'm going to allow you to simply introduce yourself, brother. Who are you? What do you do? Give us a little bit of the up-to-today life of Thomas.
So my name's Thomas. I'm from the UK. I have a master's in finance and investment. I've worked for investment funds, for investment platforms, and I'm very aware of what's going on right now, and I would love to help bring solution to the problem because I feel like everyone's just caught up in the politics and no one's actually addressing the major issues.
So let's start there. What do you address as the problem?
I think the major issue that we are facing is how do we spend our money as a country? And I think the US is in a very similar situation. I think France and Germany as well, Europe's in that same situation. How do we best allocate our dollar, and how well, how do we need to really do tax reform to really actively address the growing disparity and inequality between the most powerful in society and the weakest? And I feel like it's about finding that balance, because on the right, you have people saying we're spending too much on people who don't deserve it. And then on the left, you're saying the rich don't deserve that money, we need it. And they want to expropriate it, when really you need to have that balance of both. There needs to be a fiscal responsibility to the people, as well as a progressive tax system where the broadest shoulders support the weakest.
So it sounds kind of similar to the right-left dynamic that we have on our side, where the right typically is focusing on, let's get immigrants out. These people are just lounging through life on my tax dollars, my Medicaid, my education, my food stamps, my Section 8. And the other side, typically, though is kind of weaned away from it a bit, especially classically from the 30s and 40s, works for the working class. And that's pretty much how it's set up over there?
It's almost identical. I feel like the way it works is we are 5 years behind you guys.
Oh, sorry. The fan is blowing over at me, and I'm afraid on the audio side, you got a little fan, little red light. I can feel it, so I know people listening in the car, I don't want that audio level to be weird.
I mean, you sound lovely from over here.
Appreciate you, brother. You sound better. I need to adopt an accent of some kind. That's.
No, I sound like we call them toffs over here. That's what you call someone who sounds like me, a toff, a posho.
Okay, you're teaching me a lot of lingo. A toff and a posho?
Yeah, a toff is what you call a conservative over here. A Tory. It's another word for a conservative, but I feel like it's it's very different to the US dynamic. It's like someone who's right wing or conservative aren't necessarily considered to be posh and from the upper echelon. If you see what I'm saying, I'm not from the upper echelon, by the way. I just had a very lucky education from my parents. God bless them. They've done right by me. I love my mum. I love my dad. Thank you for the schooling. But yeah, it's a very weird dynamic. I feel like the difference between the US and the UK. It's like, for example, I'm sure you would agree with this. In the US, the American dream effectively says anyone can aspire to be in the top echelon of society, to be wealthy, and to be successful. That's the premise of the American dream. Whereas in the UK, if you want to be considered posh or part of the upper echelon, you can only be born into it. You have to be part of old money. You can make as much money as you want, but you still wouldn't be one of them. I feel like that's how the class system really differs between the UK and the US. Like, for example, there's even a TV show about it. It's called Made in Chelsea, and the people who go on this show, one of the parents created, I think it was Maltesers, the sweet. His grandfather is a lord in the House of Lords. These people are from a completely different set of society which no one else can access, and I feel like that's the major difference politically, socially, and economically between the US and the UK, and that's where the taxes need to be diverted to.
More of a classism, feudalism type setup.
It's effectively modern day feudalism, but it's like, have you seen Gentlemen with Matthew McConaughey?
No, I need to catch up on my TV series.
So it's a movie effectively where Matthew McConaughey goes around to all these lords who have these really old manors, but they have no money, and they can't afford them. So he effectively gives them money in return for doing weed, plants, and everything like that. But it effectively shows that they are part of the top upper echelon, but they may not necessarily have money. I think so. That's I feel like the major difference between the US and the UK. In the US, money is power. In the UK, your name is power.
And it seems a bit like it's in America we're experiencing a similar lifestyle where there is a sect of people, a small sect of people that are living a lifestyle that's inaccessible. I think in America, like you brought up the American dream, is this thought that one day you'll get there. You'll work hard enough and you can get there. I just don't think you actually can. Whereas it seems like at least over there you guys know it.
in the UK, and this is another, I think, mindset that differs between the US and the UK. In the UK, we frown upon people who strive for success. But in the US, we celebrate it.
Define success. Like, what do you mean by that?
So, for example, if someone's trying to start their own business, trying to do something new and trying to do something different that isn't necessarily conventional at that time, people will frown upon them, people will question them, and until they've actually made it, and even when they do make it, they're like, oh, I can't support them. And a really good example is it's this guy called Jamie Lang. He has a great podcast called Great Company, and he went again on a TV show called Made in Chelsea. He comes from a very good family who are incredibly wealthy, old money, and he's created his own candy company. Great podcast that's incredibly profitable, and he's done a lot of different projects that have been incredibly profitable. And people go, well, I don't want to support him because he comes from money. It's like they put him down on the basis of his success, regardless of his, or in this, in spite of his background.
Why?
So it's like he's done this on his own, despite the fact that he comes from a good family. They haven't helped him. Maybe they've given him some seed money, but it's frowned upon for him to be successful. Whereas in the US, it's like we support. I feel like the US has such a positive mindset where even when it's difficult, people still celebrate it, even if they come from good backgrounds. Nepotism in the US is still obviously a big thing, but I feel like we frown upon it here so much. Even when people come from bad backgrounds, we still look down upon them like, oh, who do they think they are? They think they're better than me. It's such a weird mindset. It's really negative here. I think it's the weather.
It's the weather?
It's perpetually grey. So, it just completely creates a dreary atmosphere in everyone else's mind.
It's the lack of those early morning sun rays.
No vitamin D.
Well, what's the option financially then over in the UK if you're going to get belittled for trying to push or grow? How does someone financially thrive? At least enough to get by, because everything's getting more expensive worldwide. It's not just America. Yeah. You guys have seen price increases, cost of living, housing, cars, insurance. So where does somebody succeed without being belittled?
This is the thing. It's you have to power through it. You have to power through the belittling in the UK if you want to be successful. But honestly, you have to do it privately. You have to be successful privately. But in this day and age, it's very difficult to do that when you need exposure. I feel like that's just a fundamental truth throughout all of it. But I'm not sure you remember this quote from Jamie Dimon where he effectively talked about the differences between Europe and the US. That since, 2008, Europe, including the UK at the time, was 95% the size of the US economy. Now it's around 65%. And he says we're falling behind, and we are falling behind because, well, the major reason is high tax and high regulation environment. So we're having all this negative pressure placed upon new businesses where just nothing can thrive. It's like having a garden with no water. How can anything grow?
Where does the US fall in that? Do you see, because like you just brought up a great stat that seems like, okay, this economy is not growing at the same pace as other major economies, China, Australia, even microeconomies within the European Union like Germany, France, not doing great. So where do you think the U.S. falls in line of blame for that? Because a lot of people see that the start of the problems and the wealth accumulation from '08 was quantitative easing and money printing. Yeah. Do you look at that as a reason for that monetary base expansion worldwide?
It's very difficult. I like the way the US recovered was effectively just powering through with huge amounts of tech growth. That's where the US's growth has come over the last 15 years or 17 years since 2008. Whereas the UK, look, if you look at if you look at the top 50 companies, top 50 biggest companies in the world, 2 of them are British, 1 is big pharma and 1 is oil. Zero tech coming from the UK, that's in the top 50 biggest companies. Yet we are second when it comes to innovation in the world. So why are we unable to scale it to the same level that the US is? Well, one reason is because the US has an institutionalized acquisition of not only British but also European tech companies, because they all look at it and go, well, why wouldn't we sell off and reposition ourselves in the US, where there's a low regulation and low tax environment where we can thrive? Like in the UK right now, we've just seen national insurance, which is effectively a tax on employing people, go up dramatically. And I think 50% of employees in the UK are small businesses. Well, 50% of people then are at risk of having the jobs being taken away from them, because how can they keep people on payroll when they can't afford to? When all taxes are going up, the cost of energy is going up, and people are spending less because there is a cost of living crisis, not only just in the UK, Europe, the US, and all around the world. We're seeing this huge crackdown on growth in the UK. Europe's the same. And I feel like the US just doesn't see it as much because there is that sense of republicanism and liberalism, whereas you should be able to decide where your money goes, right? For example, Texas doesn't even have any income tax, does it? It doesn't have any... I know it has high... Sorry, what's that?
Oh, lost you there for a second. Let's look that up real quick. Does Texas have an income tax? I don't know.
Is it income tax?
I know we in Delaware don't have a shopping tax. I know there's different states that you're given that ability per state to state how you're going to tax your corporations, how you're going to tax your businesses, how you're going to tax oil, travel. Yeah, it says no, Texas does not have a state income in Texas.
Yeah.
They have 6.25% sales tax though. That's where Delaware's is at 0. Which
is like
constitutional protected. Yeah. Income tax was something that we came up with as a country to fund a war.
Exactly.
And it was something actually deemed to be temporary that didn't end up being temporary, similar to the gold standard. When we left that was supposed to be a temporary effort. So you mentioned a few times this is an international problem. But I think you're hyping up America a little bit too much here, because we're pushing through, but the pushing through is merely statistical, because our production versus GDP is atrocious. Our government spending versus what we make is growing. It's not improving, it's growing. I think America just has what's the right word? We have the ability to cover our problems in the fact that we are the worldwide reserve currency. We have the petrodollar flowing. We get this giant Band-Aid when we can say, oh, it's not going well, our bond market's about to crash in 08, let's invent this money printing thing. Let's hold residential mortgage-backed securities off market. And income-wise, I want to hit this on the Europe side, and then we can kind of merge into what does someone do about it here in the next 20. Where are income levels at where you're at right now? Because here in America, for example, you need to make about $108,000 to $121,000 a year, depending on what state you're in, most median homes, to qualify for that home. And that's up more than double in 5 years. Are you guys seeing similar wage suppression while everything else is getting expensive, or at least stagnation in wages while everything gets more expensive?
So UK wages are so low. They are so low, it's becoming insulting. So for example, how would I kind of best describe it? I think the best way to describe it is relative to the social welfare that we give to pensioners and the pensions they receive. So, like for example, in France, the average pension that a French pensioner will receive is equal to that of the average income a young worker will receive. So, when a pension is now outpacing a worker's active salary and his contribution to growth in the country, there's a problem. There's a huge problem with wage suppression. And in the UK, for example, house prices are becoming so untenable that if you don't buy one now, there's no point saving up for it because of how much it's growing every year. It's almost becoming like this is your last chance to buy a home. in the UK. And a really good example is doctors. Doctors are striking in the UK because they are, I think, for the amount of hours they were working, they were getting paid, junior doctors, £15 an hour, which is about maybe $20. But these are people who have over £100,000 worth of debt, are working night shifts, huge amounts of time as their time as a junior doctor, and even when they qualify, they may not even be they may be unemployed because we aren't employing as a country enough doctors. Yet we don't have enough doctors to actually fulfill the needs of the people. So we have a demand and supply issue on both sides. So the premise of what's happened is they had a huge 25% salary increase, and now they're looking to strike again because they still feel like relative to real relative to adjusted inflation, they have had a pay cut, and they have. Everyone has. But the problem is, I think the average salary in the UK is £37,000, but the average house is £288,000. But we have a divide where in the south, everything is way more expensive than it is in the north. So if you look in London, the average house price in London is about £580,000. So if you're earning, let's say, a good salary, which is around £60,000 in London, you're in a house share with 5 other people sharing, and you're in maybe a small double bed, and you have 2 degrees, you've got a decade's experience, and you're still living with other people. So no wonder no one's getting married, no one's having children, and we're seeing an aging population because wages aren't. Who can afford it? You can't afford a home in the UK presently, and it's a disaster.
What changes is there anything that the UK is currently doing to start spearheading what's clearly a large working class problem?
What they've done is they've increased taxes. That's because we've got a Labour government. So in the last election cycle, which was last year, the Conservatives have basically driven the country into the ground. They had 14 years of unprecedented leadership, and unfortunately, they just messed up. They just couldn't keep the country together. They had a huge amount of quantitative easing, which effectively destroyed the integrity of the public services. And this led to the effective wage stagnation in the public services. And also, whilst they did trying to keep taxes low, they never cut them. So effectively, the UK suffered from something called fiscal drag. And fiscal drag is when they have frozen tax brackets. But as you know, inflation also inflates wages over time. And as a portion of your income, we are now spending more on taxes than we were 10 years ago. And there hasn't been an adjustment in the tax brackets as a result. And there needs to be now, because inflation after COVID especially has gone up dramatically. And so when it comes to what's going on now, the government is basically saying we're going to tax our way out of this, but we also need incredible growth. And those two things are hypocritical. They're oxymoronic. You can't have growth with high tax environments, or if you do, it's very, very difficult. And it's been very weird. The Labour government have basically said, we are the fastest country, we have the fastest growth in the G7 in the first 2 quarters of this year, because effectively they raised around, I think, 50 billion in taxes and increased spending by 70 billion, which is around like 6 or 5% of our spending.
GDP.
Yeah.
Or your spending.
Yeah, and it's becoming, so it's like, okay, so this artificial growth. You've just spent more, you've thrown it at the wall, and no one is seeing a legitimate and substantial improvement in their living. Like farming's dying. They've introduced an inheritance tax on farmers, and we've had farmers end their own lives, unfortunately, because they know if this comes into play, the farm will be cut up and sold to big, massive conglomerates, because these family farms cannot maintain them at the current levels of taxation. You should check out this guy. It's called Petit Peonies on Instagram. He now makes more from his social media than he does from farming, and he's evaluated what he's going to grow for next year, and he knows he's not going to make a profit on anything. This is the state of the country we're in, because we used to have subsidies from Europe, but we left Europe. They never replaced them. And we had this because I think the membership was around 14 billion pounds. I think that's how much it was. I might be wrong. It might be 17 billion. But we had this 14 billion pound surplus that we weren't using now that we had left Europe, and no one knows where it went. It was said it would go towards employing more nurses, employing more doctors as part of our national health insurance. It was said to go towards helping farmers to ensure that we can keep food levels affordable and farmers profitable. None of that's happened. And where's it gone? It's such a mad state. And, when we talk about taxing the rich, have you ever heard of Gary Stevenson? Do you know Gary Stevenson?
I sure do.
So Gary Stevenson, he makes a very poignant point. He's one of the fastest growing public economists that we're seeing right now. And he's both right and wrong. He's saying 2% wealth tax and everyone above £10 million would generate around £24 billion a year in tax revenue. That sounds like a lot in the UK especially. It'd be a lot more in the US, I'm sure. But our debt alone, interest on our debt alone is around 100 billion in the UK. So that wouldn't even put a dent in that. So the analogy I like to use is we're seeing this debt problem in the US, the UK, Germany, France. Everyone can see it. And it feels like we're at the cliff edge. But really, we're not at the cliff edge. We're falling off, and we have to hope we hit the bushes now. Because we can't cut spending. I think with Donald Trump's and Elon Musk's Doge team, they proved they couldn't cut the budget. Yeah. They proved they couldn't in a substantial manner.
In a way, like you said, it's only doing a small dent to the overall problem.
And so this is where we're seeing this divergence on the left and the right, and it neither one's right, but neither one's wrong. So Gary Stevens says we need to tax the rich. I mean, yes, we should. But if we tax the rich to 1 or 2% wealth tax, would that create a substantial amount of tax, or would that be everything but an expropriation of wealth that would erode the wealth's wealth over time and then lead to a lesser ability to actually tax them? Because in the UK, 28% of all income tax revenue comes from the top 1%. So if we're attempting to erode that wealth over time with that 1 or 2% wealth tax, because it does, if you tax assets instead of income, you to meet that demand, to meet that tax bill, they have to sell off assets, which is what Gary Stevenson wants, right? Because he wants people to be able to afford homes. So this whole there isn't just one solution here. It's not as simple as tax the rich and cut spending. It's being prudent with spending, having accountability, some fiscal responsibility with where that money's going, and ensuring the broadest in society are paying their fair share. And I think if you look at places like France, I think they have an effective tax rate of almost 70%, the highest tax bracket on earned income. So
it's not working for them either.
And it's not working for them because they haven't had a budget surplus since 1974. So it's not a tax issue there, that's a spending issue. But in places like the UK, like for example, we are building a new nuclear power plant addition. It's called Hinkley Point Sector C, I think it's something like that. And it's the most expensive nuclear project in history.
UK history?
In history.
World
to build
history.
a nuclear power plant. I think there's an estimate it's going to reach around £100 billion. I think that's correct. Around £100 billion. It's how much it's going to cost not to build a completely new nuclear power plant in addition to this nuclear power plant. And we can't do it, and it's going to take a decade. And we've decommissioned 7 out of 9 of our nuclear power plants. So there seems to be a bureaucratic issue managing the money. No one knows where it's going. No one knows. I feel like the US has a fairly similar issue, don't they? Remember when the Pentagon has failed 3 back-to-back audits, and billions is just gone. They don't know where it is.
They've been known for that. $2 trillion was announced missing on September 10th, 2001, and then that exact office got hit. You can connect those dots.
Yeah, it's not even conspiracy anymore, is it? It's just a fact.
It's not, dude. It's a straw hat, but it's made out of tin, I swear. The London gold pool, I don't know if you know about that one. That's right there, London gold pool. That gold just disappeared. Big money loves making magic tricks of money disappearing. And then on the side of just overall, where's our money going when we're being taxed? You mentioned 26% comes from the top 1%. It's a much more skewed version here, just because of the fact of our LLCs hide money so much simpler, foundations, trusts. You can open up a business in Bermuda and start moving money through that.
Yeah.
There's so many weird things you can do that.
Yeah, open up a closet in the Cayman Islands and you're golden.
Exactly. Yeah, have one of your board members vacation there for a month, and all of a sudden your company's based there. And it's a problem that you're right. There's not one solution for a lot. For us here in America, we believe it has to start with legislation. We have to get lobbying out. We got to get age limits. We got to set better term limits. We got to get people who want better for people, not politics for profit. Which that seems like to be an international issue in most countries, is that money involvement and donor involvement in politics moves the needle way too much in terms of weighting. Like, obviously, a donor puts up $500 million. It's usually not because they just like their personality. It's because they want something. So
it's a bit of tit for tat, isn't there?
Exactly. And so that's a great segue, the tit for tat thing that I want to get, because there's one thing that's happened very recently that affects both of our economies, and that's tariffs. Now, there's a lot of conversation on the domestic side about tariffs and how it moves from exporter to importer to the person who's actually merchandising it and then giving it out to the consumer. Where is your economy at in kind of like, what's the vibe check on tariffs in the UK?
It's almost like it's because obviously America is one of our biggest trading partners, but it's been swept under the rug recently in the UK. It's obviously a huge factor that's going to affect the cost of living, but our cost of living is already so outrageous. It's just a drop in the water for what's going to affect the underlying cost of just existing. So a really good example is, so UK on average has 80% higher energy costs than Europe. 80%
okay,
higher.
so let's put a pin there. Why? Why specifically there? Is it, you guys getting a lot of data centers?
Oh, it's not. We don't even have the data centers yet. Well, the US has just promised 150 billion pounds worth of investment on behalf of BlackRock, Nvidia, to create these data centers. Let's go. You know, give us that money.
Love BlackRock. Yes.
Let's go. You know, we've got the Panama Canal and now Britain. They're just buying everything.
They ran out of stuff to invest in here, dude. They got to start going abroad.
Yeah, they definitely. I don't understand how it's legal what they're doing, but well, obviously
Panama Canal, Australian data centers. They just opened and closed on the largest real estate investment trust in India. They're funding the Dallas Stock Exchange.
It's absolutely mind blowing, and I feel like it's almost like the to obviously segue. I feel like that's just the issue with pure capitalism versus communism, right? A communism is the authoritarian regime always hoards wealth at the top and they control everything. They are a farm animal that's better than the others, for example. And then on capitalism is, well, inevitably, when you have more money, you can save more money and then you can allocate more money as a result, which allows you to hoard more wealth over time. And inevitably, it just rises to the top.
I caught the Animal Farm reference there.
Yeah, we love it. We love Animal Farm. Big up George Orwell. It's good. But going back to what we were originally talking about, like the problem with the UK energy costs is, well, firstly, we have reduced our capacity for gas. And then the way we cost things wholesale is something called cost marginal pricing, I believe it's called. Cost marginal pricing, CMP. And effectively what's happened is basically everything is cheap, but because gas is the most expensive, everyone is being charged at the level of gas, which is the most expensive form of energy in the UK presently. And it's because we have I think a 19-day supply of gas in the UK. So if we are relying on gas because we don't have enough energy to meet demand, we have 19 days.
19. Sean, can we look at how much we have in America? How many days reserves of, you said gasoline? 19 sounds really low.
It's really low. It's not normal. And because we don't drill, we're not going to start drilling or prospecting for new natural gas or oil in the North Sea anymore, which is in our home turf. And when we were, it was costing over 200. I think it's 200. I think they were doing it in dollars, $200 a barrel. Whereas Norway, which also has access to the North Sea, is $80 a barrel in terms of the cost of the barrels of oil that they were taking out of the North Sea. So for some reason, it's really expensive when we're doing it, but it's fine for the Norwegians. So that we're seeing this. Everything in the UK is just so deeply inflated. And then the other issues with that energy is that, so in 2024, the UK spent £1 billion to turn off wind turbines. to turn them off.
Why?
And it's all to do with the fact that it's intermittent energy, which ultimately means that when there's a surplus of energy, because the national grid cannot handle it, you have to turn it off so it meets the current demand. But then in November last year, we almost had power cuts because we were relying solely on gas. We had a limited reserve, and obviously there wasn't enough wind to actually blow energy into the turbines. And obviously, because it's going to winter, we didn't have the solar arrays actually developing enough power either. So we have an energy issue in the UK, and this is before we actually see all these data centers come in from the US. We're going to have a huge issue in the future in the UK, and when we talk about tariffs, it's like we need to address the fact that the blood life of the UK, which is energy, is becoming an issue. We cannot let it. It's flabbergasting. We're relying on this. I believe in net zero, but what's happening is that we've gone away from nuclear to renewables, but these renewables are so heavily intermittent that they do not provide enough reliant energy for the people to meet our demand, especially when we have a growing population.
I guess I have to imagine, and I'm not a turbinologist or a wind studier. Is there not a more effective way to utilize, you said £1 billion to make more wind turbines? Like, I don't know what the cost of solar panels and wind turbines are on its scale. I just imagine pressing the off, that's an expensive off switch for one.
It's so outrageous. Obviously, again, it sounds bad, and I understand there are the technology limitation issues, but the limitations always come from the fact that it's not like the turbines. Say, for example, you live in the south and all the turbines are in the south of England. The energy doesn't supply the south first, and then the remnants of that energy goes to the national grid. It goes past the people in the south to the national grid, and then it's dispersed from the grid itself to the entire country. So if it was people's power was regionally allocated from those renewable energy sources, their energy would be so much cheaper. But it's not.
And at the very least, in a situation like that, you would be creating a world where you only have one power grid that needs to be, reallocated, or we need to audit how we're doing this instead of the entire country. Is what you're saying is if they were to regionalize these power sources.
Mm-hmm. If they regionalised it, energy would be so much cheaper. But it's not. It's done nationally. And it's all done on this cost marginal pricing that they do, which is done at the highest cost of energy, which is gas. And because we have reduced our ability to reserve gas, they've all been shut down for some reason. I don't know why. We've got a huge amount of limitations when it comes to gas because we import it from France. And because we're obviously an island, the cost of importing that gas is astronomical. Whereas France has maintained the nuclear power infrastructure, and they're doing really well. They export energy. They're a net exporter of energy to the entirety of Europe, including Germany, which has reduced their nuclear capacity deeply. And that's why they had huge energy costs and issues when the whole Ukrainian-Russian issue happened, because they had built the Nord Stream pipeline to get natural gas from Russia, and obviously it got blown up. So there was this really weird move to renewables without making sure that you have this backbone, which is nuclear. I feel like nuclear should be the backbone of energy to ensure that you always have some power that can be produced at will, that isn't terribly dirty like fossil, coal power plants, which we've completely shut down. Probably should.
Careful with your nuclear facilities, man. We might send a jet. Careful. I don't know. We've been known to send jets to nuclear facilities.
Oh my god! I feel like nuclear. It's had such a bad rep, but ultimately,
Yes.
It's got such a bad rep.
Yes.
Rightly so, maybe. But again, over 100 billion to build a new nuclear site. Incredibly expensive. Gas is incredibly expensive. 80% high cost relative to Europe. And so when we talk about tariffs with the US, I wish we could say, okay, this is a major issue that we would like to negotiate, but we can't because it's just one of many cost of living issues that we're facing at the moment.
You're not really in a position to negotiate at that point because of all the issues going on. That makes sense. Well,
we're importing from the US, aren't we?
the gas thing, Hawaii is our number one in terms of cost per gallon of gas. I think theirs is like $1.50 above median because of
Oh my
being
god.
an island and having to transport it in. So that checks out. The
How much
gas
do you
thing is
think? How much do you think are petrol and diesel costs per liter?
so our median here is 312, I believe it sits at. I'm gonna guess you guys are in the high fours.
I mean, for it per pounds, it's £1.30 a liter. I'm not sure because how do you guys measure it? Is it in gallon or liters?
Gallons.
Gallons. I don't know what the conversion is to gallons. This is an imperial versus
I think it was
metric
like
issue.
two and a half. I think it was about 2.5 liters in a gallon. Anybody got their Scholastic journal?
2.5. So that would be one. So it's £1.30 at the minute, times 2.5. So
Incorrect.
£3.
It's about 4 liters to a gallon. About 4 liters to a gallon.
4 liters to a gallon. 4 liters to a gallon. So times by 4. Oh my god! So for us, it's about £6, which would be about $8.
675, 680. Good lord.
That is so energy over here is just incredibly expensive, and despite
It
the
is.
fact that the wholesale price has gone down drastically, it's gone down 25% year on year. We've actually seen a 2% increase in the energy cap. So the wholesale's gone down, but our costs are going up as consumers, which is crazy in terms of household prices.
That would convert from the dollar. Is that pound to dollar too? Liter to gallon, pound to dollar. It's about $9 a gallon in comparison. So you guys are about 3 times our cost.
And now, have you heard what they want to do? They want to introduce tax per mile in the UK. So, tax per mile.
Explain that.
They want to introduce, and this is a think tank that's effectively recommending it to the current administration in the United Kingdom, that basically wants to tax us, I think, 9 pence per mile. So for 10 miles, it's almost £1. So for me to go to my local town, which is 10 miles away from me, I will have to pay £1 there and then £1 back. That's what they want to do.
I'm not really understanding that. And here in America, that's actually something you're able to pay less taxes on when you're driving.
This is the thing, we're getting, so in the UK, have you heard of ultra low emission zones? Have you heard of those?
No.
So if you want to go into London, okay, say I've got a car that's from like 2008. If I go into London, I have to pay a congestion tax just to go into London, which is about £8. And then I have to pay an ultra low emission fee per day. This only covers me for the day, which is an additional £12. This is on top of my insurance and of course my car tax. And so to go into London just for the day, it's going to cost me £20 just to go in to the zones that are affected by this. And they want to introduce this into every single major city in the UK. Bristol has it, which is close to me, which is on the west coast. They have ultra low emissions, and they effectively are taxing diesel effectively out of existence. They want to destroy it. We are facing a crisis in the UK in terms of tax. So like when people say, high regulation is not that much of an issue, if you get a letter through your door effectively saying, well, you entered this zone and you didn't pay the relative tax based on the kind of car you have, this can just magnify into huge issues. My mum, for example, went to Birmingham, it's a town up north in the Midlands, and she didn't have the right car. She had a diesel car. She didn't know she had to pay the tax. She went in, came out, and she had, I think, around £160 worth of penalty charge notices come through the door.
That quickly. How are they
That
noticing
quickly.
it? How are they tracking that?
Oh, we're getting into a beehive of issues that the UK is really suffering from. So, for example, the UK has double the amount of active cameras, speed cameras, for example, that France and Germany does. And it's become a new way to tax people to generate tax revenue for the country. It's a significant avenue of tax that a government accesses to ensure that they can increase their revenue. Because it doesn't go to local councils. It goes directly to the government coffers.
Creating revenue from mass surveillance, essentially.
Effectively, yeah.
That's enough. That's enough. We're trending into a darker topic, a Black Mirror episode. So
it's like, but this is the thing. When you talk about finance and economics and the solutions, it's inevitable that you have to talk about these issues because it's costing people so much money. It's so much money. Just a silly little mistake of not checking what zones you're crossing during the day can cost you hundreds of pounds.
So if I'm hearing you right, as somebody in the UK, if you want to financially succeed, you need to be born into the right family. You need to do it privately. You need to live with 7 other people and not drive anywhere.
Yeah, that's how you be successful in London.
So let's talk about America then. So if somebody's listening to this, let's talk to the American friends. We're going through a very similar problem. It almost seems like you guys are 2-3 years ahead of where we're going to be, where housing is nationally understood to be way overpriced. I think we're about, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but definitely more people have woken up to that fact in the last year and a half. It seems to be happening at a quicker pace amongst the people who are just like, work harder. What are you talking about? We did it. They're the same people you're talking about that have the significant pensions and IRAs and their home price that went up 800% over their 30 years of living there. And they're not financial savants. They're just old. So in America, we have the young generation that's looking for advice, that's looking for what do I do. If we set some facts in stone, right? I'm going to give you some facts to play around with. We're going to do a little simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and say 5 years from now, summer of 2030, or I guess fall of 2030, we're still in an inflated market. There was no giant crash. There was no inevitable crash that people wanted. All right. The dollar has continued to weaken against the index, against the pound, against the peso, against the yuan. It's weakening in every direction. And let's also assume that the things like the stock market and the bond market stay intact. So let's just say those things are true. We just keep inflating. The labor force keeps depleting. It gets a little bit harder and a little bit harder for the working class to go. The drip effect of this K-shaped recovery from COVID continues. How could somebody today, knowing what we know and assuming that 5-year future, what could somebody do right now to kind of start prepping for that to be at least better off in 5 years?
I think the answer is to sacrifice. I think that's just the only way, because I think we're entering a survival period. I think we're very lucky, our generation, because how old are you?
31.
31. Oh, we're almost the same age. I'm 29. So our generation, I think we're very lucky that we have access to so much technology that even when times get tough, we can still be entertained. I think that's the difference between us and the older generations when they're, like, for example, in the 90s with extraordinary high interest rates and all the dot-com bubble. And so I think the answer to go forward is it's to sacrifice now, to put that money away, because I think there was this really interesting stat that said for every pound or every dollar invested at 20, it will be worth around $70 after 45 years by the time you retire. So the sooner you have that pool of money put away somewhere safe, the sooner you will be able to build wealth. And I feel like people also forget that it only takes a little bit of money over time to be able to build that wealth over time. And so over the next 5 years...
Give me baby steps. Give me baby steps then. So let's focus on that word sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
I'll define that. Let's go ahead and say somebody makes $60,000 a year, which is about median for a college grad. It hasn't gone up as much as it needs to. So let's say you're making about 60 grand, 80 grand maybe. And I'm able to sacrifice, get rid of 2 or 3 subscriptions, not go out twice a week, instead go out once every 2, 2 date nights a month instead of 4. Let's say I do that. I sacrifice, I don't do anything extra, not buying any games, I'm not doing any of that. And I'm able to put away $500 a month. Where do I put it? Because if I'm just getting started in this, and this is the first time I've ever analyzed my finances, it's the first time I ever found this 450 surplus I could have, 525 surplus I could have. What do I do with it? Because if I'm a layman, I'm just going to put it in a bank account, and that's going to get eaten by inflation. And if I let it sit and it doesn't grow to beat the weakening of the dollar and inflation, it's not really growing. So do I buy bonds? Do I buy crypto? Do I buy something that's not tied to the dollar? Do I just buy assets? Do I continue to save for a home? Where should I be focusing my energy so that money does grow?
I think the first thing you do a budget analysis, and this is where you identify what your expenditure is relative to your income, and you can find out how much you can have surplus depending on moving your income from areas of low priority to areas of high priority. And those areas of high priority, for example, will be reaching those financial goals you want to hit. So, for example, do I want to buy a home in the next 5 years? Okay, how much will I need to save up to do that? But then when it comes to saving up, do you really want to put your income that you're saving up into a high exposure environment like the stock market? The answer is probably no. You want to put it into a high yield savings account, for example, where you're at least going to be beating the rate of inflation, and that money is safe. But it doesn't mean you can't, in conjunction, invest in the stock market and have dual financial objectives. Really, you want to be like there's different ways of doing it. I personally believe around $300 or £300, depending where you're from, $300 is enough to really be comfortable for retirement and have a survivable income. But really, you should be investing as much as you can now. So when you get to your 40s, 30s, 40s, and you have children, you're not going to be worrying about retirement. Your 20s are where the growth really has a significant impact. So, for example, the difference between £1 and also let's say dollars. Let's talk in dollars because you guys are Americans. American show. Oh, yeah, I'll talk in dollars. At 20, so at 20, that $1 invested can potentially, at an 8% adjusted rate of growth, be $70 by the time you retire. If you invest $1 at 30, it's only going to be around $20. So see how dramatic that change in growth potential is. It's huge. So if you invest, you can have the same similar portfolio outcome, investing only $300 a month, $300 a month at the age of 20, versus if you want to meet that same outcome, you need to invest around over $1,000 at the age of 30. So the sooner you start, the better. And it's never going to be perfect because your portfolio isn't a straight line that goes up that's smooth and you're hoping it's going to be successful. It's going to be a rigmarole of ups and downs, including, like, for example, buying a property, or it comes back up, or your car gets written off and you need to buy a new car. It's not smooth sailing. But it's ensuring that you not only have an emergency fund to address these issues, it's not only that you're meeting financial objectives and sticking to them, it's also making sure you sacrifice to meet those financial objectives instead of, for example, buying on finance a 1 or 2 year old Mercedes Benz that you need like a hole in your head. It's the last thing you need. Or I feel like you guys have like giant trucks. I feel like that is the preference over there, isn't it? Over here, it's European cars.
We're in big truck central here in Milford, Delaware, Sussex County, Delaware. We love trucks.
We could never do that here. We don't have the roads for it.
All right, so 5 steps. I added 1 because you insinuated and I wanted to verbalize.
Apologies. Yeah.
Budget analysis, sacrifice, high yield savings account, eliminate debt, invest.
Agreed.
That the 4th one's the one I added. So
reduce liabilities, increase investments.
Yes. Once your debt's gone, increase investments. But while the money is sitting, high yield savings account. Some people here would do like a money market account or something like that.
I feel like that's the comparison. Yeah.
The budget analysis side, I think, is where people get hung up. What do I analyze? Analyze. Almost made up my own word. The first step I took were twofold. One, I remember printing out, it was like 7 years ago. I printed out my bank statements from the last 3 months, and I just got a yellow highlighter, and I started walking through and highlighting everything that was a need. Like, we could not get rid of this. And what I discovered was only about 60% of the transactions were highlighted. So then the sacrificing period came. Another way that you could do it, I knew this till like 5 years ago, maybe 6, is a net worth tracker. Because I think when it comes down to the eliminate debt section, like for me, and maybe it's my ADHD, but when I was paying off debt, right, my first debts, we got a fence at our first house because our neighbors were nuts. but privacy
Oh, always
fencing
the
to go
case.
120 feet was just so expensive. We had to get a loan. When I went to go start paying it off, I was like, we're wasting money. We could be investing this. I'm going to business. We're trying to get you out of your
Yeah.
job. But when you put it on a net worth sheet, it like gamifies it, because now you pay off the debt and the net worth number goes up. And that to me was exciting. So budget analysis, know your net worth, know where your money's going in and out, sacrifice what's not needed. I love a highlighter to go through on the bank statement. High yield savings account, money market account. Any specific recommendations on which one or where someone should focus their time or energy?
I'm trying to think of which ones that you have in America. Like, do you guys have Trading 212?
Training 212. We might. I'm not aware of it.
I think Trading 2 in the UK we do have the comparison is cash ISAs, which is basically where you put your money in, is tax free, and they also give you a fixed rate return per year, based on the Bank of England interest rate. So that's what we have in the UK. I'm not entirely sure if there's if Trading 212 has that in the US. Robinhood might. I'm not entirely sure. But I feel like also you can go to your bank and they will have high yield saving account options. Sometimes you can get higher yields if you lock in that money for 12 months. Also, I think a good thing to point out is, in the US, do they have pension match contributions over there with your companies?
It's becoming less popular, but we do have it.
Is it really? I think always ensure that you're checking you have it and then maximize your match, because that's free money.
Yeah, between the 401k, Roth, IRA, if you have access to that, especially via your workplace, maxing that out is
It's
important.
worth
They need to
maxing
increase those maxes to match inflation.
Well, in the UK, they're talking about reducing them in comparison. This is a really interesting point, actually. A little segue. So the government now has made themselves able to access your bank account directly to pay off any capital gains you've made on savings.
Capital gains on savings?
So you get taxed on interest above a certain threshold in savings. And they can take it out directly. They can garnish your income and they can take it from your bank account now.
Sounds lovely. Let's talk about eliminating debt. If you're going to eliminate debt, Mr. Thomas, what do you think is the best rule of thumb? Let's say I have a car, personal loan for something in my house, student debt. Is there an order of operations I should attack the debt? Should I attack it all at the same time? What's your advice there?
Obviously, when it comes to, if we're going to talk about you examine the highest APR, you pay that one off first, and you just hyper focus, pay the minimums on everything else, and focus on the highest interest debt possible, and then participate in what's called the snowball method, and wind your way down all the debt, and it becomes easier and easier once you have less to pay off. I think that's one the highest the highest interest.
I've heard that advice before, and I think it's sound. The snowball effect.
Yeah,
which,
I think so.
like you said, APR, that's the interest rate, highest interest rate. Usually that's going to be credit card or a car.
Yeah.
So pay off the highest interest rate debt because it's ripping you the most, and it's going to eat into your savings the most. And then the last part, invest. Once we have debt eliminated, and we're not getting eaten by the interest rate monster, which, by the way, I say eliminate all debt except housing. If you have a home, that usually is low interest debt. So once the interest is below what you could make, you can leave that be. I have, and I'd be curious to hear your takes on where to invest the money. So I have a few. Index funds, spread you across a lot of different stocks and a lot of different valuations. IRA, pension, Roth, whatever your company offers, especially if they max it. Gold and silver, I love as a kind of insurance against the dollar. Crypto also seems like the world is blockchaining. I think Bitcoin, Ethereum, things like that are good investments to make. And then the last one I just have is just stocks of your own research. There's definitely opportunities when you believe in something, or one of our politicians believes in something financially. It's usually good to follow them because they get to inside trade. And there are stock opportunities. You mentioned, though, at the beginning, and I want to draw back to that. You said you would be cautious investing into the stock market.
I think if you, for example, have a short-term goal And so a year from now, you want to allocate that money into a home or to something else, or a gift for a family member, or a car, anything of the sort. Do you really want it in the market, especially in times like right now, where there is an element of market uncertainty? The answer is probably no. But if you are wanting to build for the long term, for a period of 5 years or longer, that's when you invest into the market. Because the chances of not making a profit over a 5 year period are so low. So low. Like, for example, when you see the average rate of growth being 8%, let's be honest, it's not 8% per year. Like, we've seen 3 years of back-to-back 20+% growth in the S&P 500 alone. In the Nasdaq, it's higher. The Nasdaq has beat the S&P 500 over the last 20 years, I think, almost every single year, apart from 2 or 3 times. So having a mix of both, if you are going to invest over a period that's greater than 5 years. So if you're, for example, retiring if you're 5 years before retirement, do you really want to be adding more money into your investment account, or do you actually want to start gliding into retirement by reducing and exposing your risk? I think that's a major element that people don't also take into account. When you are investing, it is also not going to be 8% consistently over your lifetime. You're going to be, the younger you are, the higher risk you can take. The older you get, you're going to have to start tapering it off, because you never know what's going to happen. 2008, 2020, these events might happen right before you're retiring, and that's as you're taking money out to actually exist. Do you really want it to be devastated by a black swan event? Probably not. So you need to have that balance. It needs to be reallocated. So, for example, do you really want all your money for the rest of your life to be allocated into the stock market? Probably not. Like you said, having diversification of assets is really good. Have you ever heard of the 5% rule? The 5% rule is you shouldn't expose yourself to and your portfolio to any asset at a percentage of more than 5%, because that 5% rule effectively says you're in 20 different diversified assets, and the standard deviation, the risk between 20 and 500, for example, is nominal. There's not much of a difference in risk at all. So why are you going to overcomplicate it and over diversify into products that won't generate you the best return? So having that 5% also, 5% in Bitcoin. Do you really want to be exposed 5% more to Bitcoin? Probably not, because that's incredibly volatile, but that's your alpha. And that's a really great way to increase your returns without also exposing your entire portfolio to a huge amount of risk by having, let's say, 50% of your portfolio in Bitcoin. Yes, focus generates returns, but diversification is key.
Diversification in terms of getting started, I want to define that. We get to step 5, we get to investing. Our high yield savings account's been growing. Let's say I got $1,500 in it. You would say, let me just throw a random number out there. If you got $1,500, you could take $150 and put them into 10 different sectors of the market. You could have something in gold, you could have something in the stock market, you could have an individual stock, you could have bonds, you could short and long-term T-bills, but you don't want to overexpose all 1,500 to one specific item, unless of course you plan on next month having another 1,500 you can put in something else, slowly growing from where I just said 10 to as many as, I want to be very clear on your definition there, you said up to and no more than 20. Not necessarily you have to get to 20, but anything more than 20 doesn't make too much sense, and having less than 5, it really just puts you at risk of one of those assets dropping significantly. I hear that. And on the stock side, if somebody heard me say index funds, and then you talked about diversifying through the stock market, same thing. An index fund is taking a bunch of stocks, a bunch of companies, putting them all together. The S&P 500 index fund, I believe, is called SPIDER or SPY. That's one you could go into. Now, on the UK side, man, give me the in. If I want to diversify myself outside of America, maybe outside of the dollar, is there room that I could throw my money into the UK market where I think it's going to grow?
So the UK market is actually doing really well, and it's quite funny because have you ever heard of Games Workshop? Did you ever buy Warhammer when you were younger? Space Marines, Tyranids, Warhammer.
Oh, Warhammer. I know of Warhammer. I don't play.
So Warhammer is one of the fastest growing UK stocks. Games Workshop, the company that owns it. Because right now, Henry Cavill's got a movie with Amazon coming out based on it. The video games are all doing incredibly well, and it's growing incredibly fast. You've got, for example, what's it called again? IBM. That is growing massively. It's adopting AI. It's doing really well. You've got Build-A-Bear, which is a UK company that is growing, had over 1,000% growth in the last couple of years. So the London Stock Exchange actually has some really interesting companies that actually enters them. So I feel like if you want to diversify, there is a huge selection of things you can actually purchase in the London Stock Exchange if you want to diversify. But then when we talk about potential for growth, the US obviously has its tech. So if you want that tech element in your portfolio, there's a huge way. You have huge ability to do it by buying the Nasdaq or S&P 500.
That goes to your original point of you saying that you guys aren't investing enough in tech. It's clear and evident via your public market, your public equities, that tech is indeed the route to go. That or stuffing bears. One of those two items.
It's Games Workshop, which is toys, and it's like, or you've got Build-A-Bear, which is also toys. So these are some of our fastest growing companies in the UK that aren't actually tech.
Toys and tech in the UK.
I mean, there's some tech. I mean, like what's it called? IBM. I can't remember. I never always forget its name. IBM is doing well, right? Intel is it's almost like not Intel. Sorry, it's International Business Machine. Is a really interesting company, but it's one of the few tech companies that we have. That's actually, but it's an old one. And it's almost like a recovery company. It's really weird because if you look at the London Stock Exchange, we don't have any companies that are new and fast growing that are going to build you huge amounts of wealth that are in the tech area. That's not where British growth is. I would say probably British growth it's really difficult to identify. I think it's mostly in our real estate. That's incredibly desirable, for example, in London. So REIT funds are also incredibly popular here if you want to diversify your portfolio into property and generate maybe potentially like a fixed income, for example, from the interest on real estate. That's an example that you may be able to access. Because I feel like, because I saw this one stat in the US, new homes are now becoming cheaper than existing homes in some areas.
That recently started to shift where resale is now more expensive.
Oh, really? Okay. But in the UK, just homes are valuable because we have a huge population explosion because of immigration. I'm not going to say whether it's bad or good. It's just a fact, right? It's just a fact. London's population has increased, I think, from 8 million to 9 million, over 9 million in the last 15 years. But there has been no meaningful increase in the supply of homes. So that's caused a huge amount of demand for property, especially on rented property. So if you're going to invest, REITs are actually a really good thing to buy in the UK because they're generating so much value. I think the average rent in the UK is like over £1,200, and that is becoming it's generating some meaningful income relative to the actual price of flats, for example. Like, for example, my father bought a flat in 2015. It's only gone up around, I think, £12,000 in value. And that seems quite low, but the rent has gone up by how much? About 40% since then. So his yield is huge relative to the growth of the property itself. So having funds that take advantage of this fact is really interesting. Then there's another thing. They've released this new rule in the UK. We're effectively saying you don't need planning permission to turn a one-bedroom flat into a two-bedroom flat. So by doing so, you are meaningfully increasing the value of that flat and the ability to generate revenue from the yield of that property. So property is becoming a really profitable area in the UK. But then there's the ethical issue of should you be profiting meaningful amounts from people's right and take away from people's right to actually live and own a property and exist. I think this is the conundrum here.
That's become a huge conundrum even for me, man. It's what got me started into shifting my own voice online is just this, I was able to pursue the American dream, had a goal, ran after it with all my might, built something, and now that very same journey doesn't seem accessible Why aren't we, as the, the younger millennials, or even just, people that were able to make it because we were born at a better time, why aren't we turning around and realizing that that path's closed? We need to figure out a way to open up a new path, a new way for somebody to get into wealth. And it sounds like the assets that can get you into wealth, real estate, stocks, these items are becoming not only more expensive, you get crypto and things in the market, the dollar going all topsy-turvy, tariffs, now you have volatility. And it all seems to be based off of our own president's tweets and economic data that's 6 and 9 months lag. So it's very difficult to try to time and predict the market. But if anything we know to be true continues, which assets continue to inflate because billionaires love more wealth, it's probably to get in on some form of asset. Could be a stock, could be a precious metal, could be a crypto, could be a bond, could be a home, could be a luxury car collection, something that's just going to hold and gain value. Yeah. Is there any other cherry on top advice you give to somebody who is struggling financially now, sub 25, and just wants to get a good foundation, want to give themselves the best chance?
I'll go back to the budget analysis of your actual expenditure, because I feel like people go, okay, well, I'll just cut this and that out. No, you need to sit down and look at your bank accounts and look at your subscriptions and what you're doing. So, for example, I did the same thing with my mother, because she was like, oh, I need to save up. I'm not saving up enough. We managed to eliminate £700 per month of spending from her monthly outgoings. That is almost £8,000 a year. It's an incredible. So she's now gained access to almost £8,000 a year in spending that she can actually save. And imagine if you're doing that when you're young. Because I think 200. I think on average in the UK at least, people have £200 to £400 worth of subscriptions, just because they just consume so much nonsense. And it's just about getting rid of all of it. You do not need Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, HBO Max, and Netflix all together at the highest price. Watch some ads. That's something I would say as well. If you have Spotify and you're not listening to ads, what are you, King Charles? What's going on there? Listen to some ads, man. Listen to a book advert. I think it's just about, if you want to ascertain a certain goal, stop going out and drinking, cut down the amount you're drinking. I quit drinking. I haven't had a drink since September last year. And yeah, I've saved a lot of money. I've cut down on all that stuff. I haven't had a takeaway since September last year as well. Or I haven't eaten out since my mom's birthday in January. You have to make those sacrifices if you want to reach your financial goals.
A takeaway would be takeout, I presume?
Yeah. Takeaway is like getting an Indian or a Chinese takeaway delivered to your door. So like Uber Eats, Deliveroo.
Live translation between UK and America. So starting with the budget analysis. It's not sexy, but it is the most effective. I've done it before. It was the first thing that kind of jogged me into getting started, because I think anybody walks in with the mindset of, well, there's nothing really that could be cut, or it's not going to make that big of a difference. I would suggest a book. It's one of my favorites. I might be back there. Might not. Yeah, no, it's the one that's right in the front, The Compound Effect. My big hat is the white one. The Compound Effect. You start little, you grow big. You start with a walk around the block, you end up with a marathon. You start with a few dollars here, you end up with a savings account. It all starts little by little. Dude, I've learned a lot right now just in what you've said about the current state of the UK economy and what's going on in London. The effects of what are happening, dude, are nationwide in every nation. Every major economy is suffering from inflation, high cost of living, asset squeeze-ups, where just normal everyday things that we need to get by in our own respective countries are becoming harder to gain. Degrees are getting harder to gain, homes, even running a family. Our rate for marriage and having a home in America, 1999 was somewhere in the 51 to 52% range. Sub 30-year-olds married and had a home. Now that number is 12.1%. That's a
same in the UK.
Drastic drop. You've gone from 1 out of 2 to 1 out of 8 and dropping. It's our labor participation rate is dropping, and the way that we can track that, you mentioned, it's different today because now you can just go out and start an Uber ride or do something like doing takeaways for people, and now you got a little bit of money to roll around in, but now you're not measured as unemployed in America. You're searching for a job and you're picking up 2 DoorDashes and all of a sudden you're not unemployed. What? It's
The,
we need to
yeah,
adjust a lot of our systems for the new age tech that we have. I feel to be able to track some of these things.
I feel like the level of, I feel like the way inflation and deflation has gone. So, for example, our technology is arguably stabilized and stagnated in price, or even gone down in price. I remember, for example, the TV that I have in my living room right now is a 50-inch TV from 2012, cost almost £3,000. Now, if you wanted a 50-inch TV with the same tech, it would be about £500 in comparison. So there's been a huge. So all the entertainment, tech, travel, all these things has arguably stabilized or gone down. All the nice to haves, all the forms of entertainment have gone down, but the essentials, food, energy, homes, they're all going up in reverse. So I feel like this is probably the most comfortable tragedy we are all experiencing. Oh, I can't afford a home, but at least got Netflix, an infinite amount of consumables to watch for only £4.99 a month with some ads. It's like we're suffering in comfort. That's what it feels like. Oh, I'm in my mum's house because I can't afford my own home, and I've got Netflix. I'm not putting. It is a problem, by the way. It is. I'm saying it's a problem, but I'm just saying it's like it's. I feel like for especially young people, people our age, it's not enough of a problem for them to be out in the streets.
You just said it eloquently. It's a comfortable tragedy.
Yeah, comfortable tragedy
That's
is probably the best way to describe this generation.
Get that on a shirt, dude.
It's like
This has been fantastic. We're gonna have more conversations like this. If you want any questions asked of Thomas the next time we can chat, put them in the comments. But where can people connect with you, man?
You can connect with me on Instagram and TikTok. I mean, I've got Twitter as well. It's just my name, Thomas Kriaris. Just look me up. You might find that I've been divorced if you look me up on Google. Just didn't work out. I'm so sorry.
We're gonna open on Thomas's divorce next episode. That's gonna be the beginning, opening topic. We're gonna deep dive into that.
We can watch the clip if you want.
We'll have the clip ready. All right.
We'll have the clips.
We'll have the clip. Thomas, been pleasant, been awesome, brother. We'll talk again soon. And if anyone wants to connect with you, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I don't follow you on TikTok. Thomas, appreciate you, brother.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, look forward to speaking to you again soon.